think we're going to get started. As I mentioned, hi, my name is Crystal Dahl, and I'm the Online Communications Manager here at Mauritius. I would like to welcome and thank each of you for joining us on today's webinar. For those of you who are new to Mauritius, Mauritius is an established global alliance of closely connected yet independent law firms that each offer a full range of high-quality, specialized legal services. We were built upon a rigorous system for monitoring and enhancing the quality of our member firms and have been connecting clients with carefully qualified business legal expertise in over 250 markets around the world since 1990. In brief, webinars are regularly presented by Mauritius members, and archived webinars can be found on our website, www.mauritius.org. Before we get started, I'd like to quickly go over a few housekeeping items. Mauritius offers the ability to listen to our webinars through your computer speakers, but if at any time you have difficulty hearing us, you may call into the designated telephone line instead. All phone lines will be muted. If you experience any technical difficulties, please press *0 at any time to connect with a support technician. You may also use the chat feature to reach out to me, and I can do my best to help you through anything that you might experience. Since you will be muted, if you have a question, please ask via the questions module. If you do not see this section on your screen, you may need to expand it by clicking on the gray bar that says questions. Lastly, in the next few days, I will distribute a copy of the presentation, a recording of the webinar, as well as each of the presenters' contact details. With that, Crystal, are you ready to get us started?
I am. Thank you, Crystal, for that introduction and for the housekeeping rules. Thank you, everybody, for attending. My job today is to introduce the speakers to you and to make sure that we stay on track. Our aim is to finish just before the end of the next hour. And as Crystal had mentioned, we may or may not have time to ask questions or answer questions. Please enter them into the chat and we will get back to you with answers on that. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker today. Fubara Anga is a lawyer and political economist. He is the founding partner in the law firm of ÄLEX legal practitioners and arbitrators in Nigeria and heads the firm's banking and financial services practices. He will give us an overview of the key components of the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement for us to have a context against which the other panelists will give us some information. Thank you, Fubara. Over to you.
Thank you very much, and good day to everybody participating in this webinar. Christopher said that my responsibility is to give an overview of what the African Continental Free Trade Area is. But by way of introduction, in 1979, Professor Ali Mazrui, who was a famous African professor, delivered a BBC series of lectures called the wej Lectures, and he diagnosed the African condition. Very quickly, he broke it down into 6 paradoxes. For our purposes here, I think 3 are important. He talked about the fragmentation, the paradox of fragmentation of Africa. It's fragmented politically with over 55 nations. He talks about the location of Africa, that despite being the most central of continents and probably the largest continent, it's the only continent almost equally divided by the equator and the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn, yet it is the most disconnected globally. And finally, he talked about the paradox of retardation, and by that he meant the fact that Africa is one of the richest continents in mineral resources and human resources, but is by far probably the poorest. It is these things that the African Continental Free Trade Area is trying to address, and the African Union, it's a flagship of the African Union. It is a free trade area. The African Continental Free Trade Area is the single largest market for trade in goods and services between the 55 African countries. It promotes and is supposed to promote free movement of persons within the African continent. It is supposed to work in conjunction with the World Trade Organization and all the already existing regional economic communities. The key element for the African Union's 2063 agenda is that African trade and connectivity and integration and development will be boosted by this African Continental Free Trade Area. It entered into force in May 2019, with 22 countries depositing their instruments of ratification. It was officially launched in July of 2019, and it commenced trading January 2021. Eritrea is the only African Union country yet to sign the agreement. So far, 36 African countries have both signed and ratified the agreements. Now, what are the aims, the main aims and objectives of this area, the African Continental Free Trade Area? It's to liberalize trade by progressively eliminating tariffs and non-tariff barriers to trade. It's to establish cooperation on investment, intellectual property rights, and competition regulations. It's supposed to enhance economic integration on the continent and to ultimately create a single market for the free movement of goods, services, and persons. Hopefully, ultimately, there will be a complete reduction or removal of over 90% of these trade barriers. Now, implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area is to be done in phases. Phase 1, which is commencing now, is to develop rules on trade in goods and services. And aligned with that is also a dispute resolution mechanism. Phase 2 will be the development of protocols on investments, competition policy, and intellectual property rights. And phase 3 will be the negotiation of e-commerce protocols. In terms of governance, what you have is that the African Union, you have an assembly of heads of states, a council of ministers for trade in each state party, a committee of senior trade officials, a secretariat which will be responsible for coordination, and as I've mentioned before, a dispute resolution body. Now, the agreement is covered by 5 operational instruments: the rules of origin, online negotiation forum, monitoring and elimination of non-tariff barriers, a digital payment system, and an African trade observatory. I'm on the second slide, and essentially, as I said before, the whole idea is to tap into existing World Trade Organization and regional economic community frameworks. And so a central
can we just go back one slide, Crystal? I think we're showing the wrong slide on screen.
Crystal, can we just go to slide 2? I'm just quickly where I'm talking about RECs. All right, I'll just go on. Yeah, exactly. Now, it is expected that the existing RECs, regional economic communities in Africa, will provide a coordinating role for the implementation of resolving non-tariff barriers, harmonizing standards, and monitoring implementation. There's a bit of flexibility, and so those regional economic communities that have attained a higher level of integration will maintain such levels. The RECs are supposed to feed implementation of attained levels into the African Continental Free Trade Area through the Committee of Trade Officials, and ultimately attain a customs union. The regional economic communities are also supposed to consolidate trade-related functions at the continental level. Can we go to the next slide, please? Even though, thank you. Now, before I talk about the highlights of various protocols, still talking about the regional economic communities, just to give you an idea, this comes in a later slide, but I'll just mention them. Right now, you have 8 African regional economic communities, which are going to be the building blocks for all what I've said before. And those are the Arab Maghreb Union, the ECOWAS, the East African Community, the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, the South African Development Community, SADC, the COMESA, the Economic Community of African States, and the Community of Sahel States. Now, this gives you an idea of the fragmentation I talked about. Right now, you have over 8 at a minimum regional economic communities that are supposed to be doing the same thing, and several African nations belong to more than one. The whole idea is that with the African Continental Free Trade Area, you will have a lot more harmonization, a lot more integration. So what are the features of the protocols? I'll quickly run through a few of them. The protocol on trade in goods, which is to deal with the payment of preferential tariffs on a large variety of goods. It's supposed to create an enhanced mechanism for traders already constrained by non-tariff barriers, including overly burdensome customs procedures or excessive paperwork. And it's supposed to promote cooperation between customs authorities over product standards and regulations, trade transit and facilitation. There's a protocol on trade in services, which is where, as lawyers and as various professional service providers, we come in. Service suppliers are supposed to have access to the African market on terms no less favorable than their domestic suppliers. There's going to be a mutual recognition of standards, licensing and certification of service suppliers and professionals, and there's going to be an attempt to create regional value chains. Now, very, very important in all this is there's a mechanism for the resolution of disputes at the state levels between state parties when it comes to trade matters. So the idea is they have a protocol on rules and procedures for the settlement of disputes. And so there's a recourse to trade remedies to ensure that domestic industries can be safeguarded if necessary, and a dispute settlement mechanism that provides a rules-based avenue for dispute resolution, so you don't have unilateral action, which is what happens these days. There's going to be, thank you. There's going to be a protocol on intellectual property rights, and this is going to take place in phase 2. Can we go to the next slide, please? I've talked about trading goods under the AfCFTA. I've also mentioned that there will be trade in services, and the details are listed here. When you get the slides, you'll see them. I've also talked on the next page, the rules and procedures on the settlement of disputes. Again, the mechanism is outlined here, and the key element is that it's to resolve disputes between state parties. If we go to free movement of persons, I think that's next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah, when we talk of free movement of persons, that's critical. The boundaries and barriers in Africa are all mostly artificial, created as a result of our historical colonial heritage. One of the things that the free trade area is to do is to promote the free movement of persons. So it seeks to facilitate the progressive implementation of the free movement of persons, right of residence, and right of establishment. Now, the timelines for these have not been determined. Next slide, please. Shall we go to the end, the final slide? No, one more. Good. I'll conclude so that I stay within time that the African Continental Free Trade Area and its, of course, associated agreement creates a myriad of economic opportunities for Africa. As negotiations have commenced and implementation progresses, it is expected that there will be an increase in industrial and economic growth, and that the agreement will enhance competitiveness, economic integration, and investment across the whole continent. It is anticipated that there will be an increase in intra-regional trade by over 50% by 2030. That's an ECA figure. And it's also anticipated that there will be an increase in real income by 7% for all African countries. And in terms of contribution to the global economy, it's expected that there will be an additional 76 billion in income for the rest of the world by 2035. What this means for Mauritius members, what this means for us as lawyers and professionals is that there's business to be done. Thank you very, very much for your attention.
Thank you, Fubara. I understand the challenge of presenting such a comprehensive topic, even an overview in 10 minutes. A lot of the information for the participants will be in additional slides or the slides that you briefly saw. I am going to move to the country-specific sessions next. You have the brief introductions of all the speakers in the invite. The brief to them has been to just give us a top 3 or 4 things to consider for specific countries. And again, reinforcing that as Meritus members, work via Vicky Berrington, the Africa Director, if you want to speak to any of the presenters about any of the topics today or connect with them. So next up on the list, I just need to switch windows here. Next up on the list representing Zimbabwe is Memory Mafo from Scanlon and Holderness. Memory, take it away.
Thank you, Crystal. Scanlon and Holderness is a full-service law firm that handles both domestic and cross-border matters from its offices in the capital city, Harare. It provides legal services for both Zimbabwean and international corporates in legal matters relating to corporate and commercial law, mining, dispute resolution, litigation, employment law, environmental law, amongst others. Next slide, please. Next slide. Just brief facts about Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is a landlocked country in the Southern African region. Its capital city is in Harare, and it has over a population of 16 million people. Its currency is the Zimbabwean dollar, as well as a multi-currency of primarily the US dollar and the South African rand. The key opportunities in Zimbabwe, it has a diverse economy, and there are opportunities in mining, agriculture, tourism, infrastructure development, manufacturing, and information technology. The primary benefits for investing in Zimbabwe are that Zimbabwe is endowed with huge natural resources, including renewables, that is the land, the forest, the water, wildlife, and sunshine, and in non-renewable minerals, oil, and gas. Zimbabwe also has a highly skilled and productive workforce. Therefore, this makes it an attractive investment destination. Next slide, please. Next slide. Now, Zimbabwe has signed and ratified the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. And for Zimbabwe to enjoy the benefits of this trade agreement, it should seek to maintain laws and policies similar or better than its neighbors, that is South Africa, Botswana, and Namibia. Now, maintaining consistent laws and policies is what is key for foreign investments in the country. Thank you.
Crystal, you're still muted.
Thank you, Crystal. Thank you, Memory, for that very brief overview and giving us a bit of time in. Next up, representing Ghana, is Kwadwo Ntrakwa from Ntrakwa and Companies. Company. Kwadwo, over to you.
Thank you very much, Crystal. Hello, everyone, and a virtual welcome to Accra, Ghana. Can I have the next slide, please? All right, in terms of the next one, sorry. In terms of the status of AfCFTA in Ghana, Ghana has signed and ratified the AfCFTA agreement. As indicated by Fubara, the Permanent Secretariat is also in Accra, Ghana. Ghana has gone a step further and set up a national coordinating office. And this is under our Ministry of Trade and Industry. And this office has clearly laid down procedures for exporting products under the AfCFTA protocols. The necessary customs infrastructure has also been put in place. And sorry, Crystal, you should be on the next slide.
Yeah, Crystal, can you advance? Thank you.
That's right, thank you. And crucially, and what excites me the most is that some Ghanaian businesses have started trading under AfCFTA. An alcoholic manufacturer air freighted container load of goods to South Africa. And then a cosmetic supplier also shipped by sea items to Guinea. These are indeed exciting times for us here in Ghana. Moving on to the next slide, in terms of the impact of AfCFTA in Ghana, again, having the permanent secretariat here in Accra reiterates what we in Ghana have always known, which is that Ghana is indeed an ideal destination for businesses to set up. It also signals Ghana as a commercial and trade center of Africa. Of course, having the secretariat here also presents a lot more employment opportunities for Ghanaian nationals. Get to the next slide, please. The government of Ghana has also put in place various policies, all geared towards ensuring that companies in Ghana get the most out of AfCFTA. For example, companies in Ghana are positively encouraged to take advantage of the government's flagship program, which is the One District, One Factory program. Essentially, under this, companies are encouraged to go into manufacturing so that there's value addition to our numerous raw materials rather than exporting in the raw state.
Can I ask the wrap up, please?
So the private sector also is positioning itself to also benefit from AfCFTA. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Kwado. I am going to move next to Kenya, as represented by John Rocha from OK Law Advocates.
Thank you very much. Crystal, next slide, please. So a very quick introduction of who OK Law is. We're a leading full-service law firm based in Nairobi. We have 11 partners and over 30 lawyers. We are ranked globally as a top-tier law firm, providing various legal services across the board. Next slide. Very quickly about our country, Kenya. Kenya is the largest economy in East and Central Africa. It is third largest economy in Sub-Saharan Africa behind Nigeria and South Africa. We've been ranked number 56 globally in 2020 by the World Bank in ease of doing business. Kenya is a member of various communities, East Africa, COMESA, and so far, according to IMF, we have very strong growth prospects with GDP estimated at about Kenya shillings 15.8 trillion by 2024 and a growth of 7.6% in 2021. Very importantly, we've been ranked first in protecting minority investors and fourth globally in obtaining credit. Next slide, please. Now, the opportunities under the agreement. First of all, Kenya and Ghana were the first to sign and ratify the agreement in March 2018. And as our country charts an economic recovery path in the wake of COVID-19, the implementation of the agreement is key. Now, it is important for Kenya because 40% of Kenya's trade is with African countries. And the agreement basically provides another forum to expand and to create new trading areas for Kenya. But there are also other opportunities for other African countries. We have a vehicle called the Kenya Vision 2030, which is a vehicle for accelerating transformation of Kenya.
30 seconds
into
left.
Sorry? Into a middle income economy by 2010. The government projects the Big Four agenda in the manufacturing, food security, healthcare, and affordable housing. Again, these all provide opportunities for other African countries to come and invest. There are various trade incentives in terms of capital deductions, lowering of the central bank rates, and so forth. In terms of challenges, next slide, please. There are obviously various challenges in which government is addressing: institutional capacity building to fight corruption, custom administration to curb illicit goods, the clearing of goods electronically, tax administration, which is now done a lot of it electronically, and various land reforms for those who want to invest in land and so forth, and the ease of registration of businesses, ease as well in terms of issue of residency and permit requirements. So there are various opportunities, and government of Kenya has done a lot in those areas to ensure that the tariffs are completely removed. Thank you.
Thank you, Gennaro. Next, we're going to go over to Angola, João Robles from FCB Advogados to present Angola to us. So, thanks, João.
Thank you, Christo. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is João Robles. I'm a partner at FCB, which is a Portuguese law firm with associated firms in Angola through EVC Advogados, and in Mozambique, AG Advogados. And I head our Angola practice. Well, these are very exciting times for African countries, and Angola is certainly not an exception. With a population of over 30 million, Angola is one of the richest countries in the world in terms of natural resources. Given its strong dependence on oil, the oil crisis of 2014 stroked hard the Angolan economy, which was finally recovering with great optimism when the COVID crisis began. During this period, the Angolan government worked hard to build a strong, sustainable, and diversified economy. Examples of this is the new strategy for the oil and gas sector, the very ambitious privatization process, which remains ongoing, notwithstanding the pandemic, and a no less ambitious PPP plan recently announced by the government, the enactment of the competition law, the removal of the major part of the foreign exchange barriers and restrictions, and finally a new private investment law, which finally widely opened the doors of the local economy to foreign investors wishing to invest in this market. Additionally, we should also highlight the fight against corruption, which has been one of the main symbols of the current presidency. Angola is therefore preparing itself to enter into this new era, which will be marked by the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreements. And I'm confident that Angola will play a crucial role, namely considering the following items. Next slide, please, which I highlighted, and which I highlight here. Angola is a politically stable country. It has a stable financial system. It has 26 banks, being almost a third of them wholly or partially held by foreign banks, and with a local currency, which is the Kwanza, which has finally gained stability after a strong adjustment conducted by the Angola National Bank. It has a massive agriculture and hydro resources and potential. The government is making a massive investment on the liberalization and diversification of the economy, being a clear example of this, the ambitious privatization process that I mentioned before, which is the so-called ProPriv, which is a key priority of the Angolan government, which aims at reducing the weight of the government in the Angolan economy. A strong investment on rail, ports, and airport infrastructure. There is a new international airport being built in Luanda. DP World was recently awarded a 20 years concession to explore the port of Luanda, and the Angolan government recently launched an international tender for the concession of the port of Lobito. Finally, a strong investment in the energy sector, with a clear focus on renewables, namely on solar projects, having a few of them being already announced. More than ever, Angola understands that it has to do its utmost to explore its potential, and that the success relies not solely on local entrepreneurs, but mainly on foreign investors, who are strongly encouraged to invest in the Angolan economy. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Joel. Moving on to Nigeria next, Rebecca Ebokpo from ÄLEX Legal Practitioners and Arbitrators. Rebecca, if you could take us through Nigeria, please.
Thank you very much, Christo, and thank you everyone for joining me. Can we have this next slide, please? So Nigeria is the most populous country in Africa. It has an estimated population of more than 200 million people. It is often referred to as the giant of Africa because it is Africa's largest economy. This makes it a target market for investors and many state parties under the AfCFTA. It also has a growing workforce that is aimed at a very youthful population, which translates to mean that Nigeria has highly skilled and productive workforce. Nigeria has also been a major player in the West African region, in the economic community, and in the African Union. It has played a major part in the gathering of support to finalize the AfCFTA, even though it was one of the very latest countries to deposit its instruments of ratification. Can we have the next slide, please? Yeah, and for Nigeria, the AfCFTA has a couple of opportunities for us, and we have also identified some challenges. For the opportunities, Nigeria's economy is greatly dependent on oil production, and over the last couple of years, there's been a bid to grow the economy by diversification. This is an opportunity that the AfCFTA gives to the country because we can then diversify our export base. This can also lead to increase in our foreign direct investment and industrialization. The AfCFTA certainly will also lead to infrastructure development for us. It will also help in creation of jobs, poverty alleviation, competitiveness, and market growth. In terms of challenges, the AfCFTA is likely to reduce the revenue of the country because we will be losing about 90% of the tariff lines on intra-African trade. Also, currently, we have infrastructure deficits, insecurity, low trade capacity, policy inconsistency, regional economic challenges, smuggling, and the rest of them. Lack of ease of doing business is also a major challenge for Nigeria. In terms of our emerging priorities, which is on our last slide, as Nigeria continues to prepare for the implementation of the AfCFTA, our identified priority has been to continue with stakeholders' engagement and to ensure that we're adequately represented in the phase 2 negotiations. We currently want to ensure that we domesticate the AfCFTA agreement in our local laws, build capacity, review our laws and regulations to align them with the intentions of the AfCFTA, implement safeguards
Rebecca, we lost your sound there.
Our infrastructure and mobilize investment. We also want to ensure that our stakeholders have market access and development, and of course, increase would not leave Nigeria shortchanged, and that Nigeria will continue to maintain its position as the giant of our destination in Africa.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. I'm not sure what happened with the technology there. It looked like we had a bit of a transmission ban. Thank you so much. The last country speaker that we have to present Mauritius is Nikhil Bulel of the Chambers of Rumila Bulel. Thanks, Nikhil.
Good afternoon. It is a delight to give you a glimpse of what AfCFTA could represent for us in Mauritius and to you, our Meritas peers. I speak as a barrister at law with a background in English and French law, having called to the Bar of England and Wales. It is good, you know, on the next slide, that our practice is inherently commercial and dispute resolution oriented with a strong base in advisory and transaction work. which includes advising foreign states and companies on their prospective activities in Mauritius. Of interest, maybe, Chambers of Urmila Bulel SC is the first law firm registered in Mauritius under the Law Practitioners Act, and it shines for, in my humble view, being headed by a woman. To the last slide, as a flavor of appeal to Mauritius members of what the free trade agreement represents, I will cite to you 2 reasons why you should consider Mauritius as part of your AfCFTA plans. Firstly, it creates a synergy between strong adherence to the rule of law, where the question of trade of services is involved. The agreement includes its very own dispute settlement mechanism, which is indeed reminiscent of a known success of prior such trade agreements. I refer specifically to the COMESA Court of Justice, which has had a strong affluence in the continent. Secondly, I will refer to fiscal incentivization. Aside from protection of rules of origin, which is inherent in the trade agreement, it is worth knowing that Mauritius as a jurisdiction provides strong fiscal incentivization to its resident companies, which has no restriction on foreign ownership. For instance, because of the laws of Mauritius do not levy withholding tax on dividends, on capital gains of non-resident entities, and on inheritance, Mauritius holds the potential to attract greater investment into Africa without hindering the ability of other African countries to collect their own revenue. In light of our strong financial services sector, I would urge you to consider Mauritius and, of course, get in touch in future collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikhil. You had 30 seconds left to go, so you caught me slightly off guard. Again, thank you for the speakers so far for giving us a flavor of the agreement and your specific country objectives, opportunities, how that applies through to you. Again, audience, the idea here was not to give you a deep briefing, but to give you a sense of where you might need to go to get more information. I want to switch over to John Rocha next. John is the Chief Director of Trade in West Africa at the Department of Trade and Industry in South Africa. Prior to assuming his role, he worked as a business advisor and consultant, and was also the project manager responsible for the SADC Regional Gas Master Plan. He's got a whole bunch of senior positions in previous Pan-African organizations, and is here to share information about the potential and the transformation impact that the agreement will have with you as an audience. John has got about 15 minutes to speak. John, I will give you a 2 minutes heads up, as I've done for the other speakers, and over to you. You are still on mute, John. Sorry, I can't hear you.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you, Christo, and good afternoon to all the participants. And thank you very much to Shane and to Mauritius for inviting us to share with you. Can we go to the next slide? I'll just give you a very quick snapshot. I'll try not to prolong my presentation. So these are basically the topics that I'm going to be touching on. I will jump the legal architecture because I think Fubara did a fantastic work there, so I'm not going to spend too much time there. Can we move to the next slide? Just to give you a quick overview of the status of trade. Next slide, please. In Africa, Leslie, the key points I want to make, the slide before this, please. The key point I want to make is that Africa's trade with the rest of the world makes about 80%. We trade very little amongst ourselves. Between 2013 and 2019, we have had a negative balance in relation to our trade with the rest of the world, where we exported goods worth about $372 billion, but imported goods worth $495 billion. So strengthening intra-Africa trade is extremely important for our own economic growth. As I indicated, the share of intra-Africa trade is very low. We know it looks between 13%, 16, some say 18. But for intra-Africa export between 2013 to 2019, it was about 20%. South Africa is a major player in intra-Africa trade, with a share of intra-Africa export varying from about 26% to 31% over the same period. South Africa is followed by Nigeria with about 13.9% and the DRC with 7%. South Africa is also a key player in intra-Africa imports. We import about 14% from the Africa. Our share of that intra-Africa imports about 14%. South Africa is then followed by Namibia with 7% and Botswana. Between 1994, when we at the end of the apartheid regime, between 1994 to about 2019, our exports into the rest of Africa grew from about 9 billion rands to 340 billion rands, and it has remained almost around about that level. So Africa is a key market for South Africa, and we're looking forward to the full implementation of the AfCFTA, which will unlock further opportunities for South Africa, not just to export, but also to import certain goods for South Africa. In terms of economic impact, our trade with the rest of Africa sustains about 250,000 jobs. Locally, it contributes about 60 billion rands towards our own economic output. It also generates about 200 billion rands in net forex from trade with the rest of the continent. So once again, extremely significant. Let's go to the next slide. But the truth is also our 80% of our trade, our exports, is into Southern Africa. So our share of exports into West Africa is extremely low. It's around 5%. Into East Africa is also still quite low, about 2.9%. Into Central Africa and North Africa, it's below 1%. And hopefully the implementation of the AfCFTA is going to help us to actually increase that share. Our exports into the rest of the continent, in 2019, we exported a total amount of about $23 billion of goods. On the right there, you see the sectors comparing what Africa imports from the rest of the world and what South Africa supplies. We have had some decrease in our exports in certain sectors, such as in automotive, also in steel and metal fabrication. We have seen some drop in furniture and forestry, and also in the defense and aerospace industry. But in return for that, we have seen growth in ocean industry. We have seen growth in mining and beneficiation exports into the continent, and also in chemicals and plastics industry. Even though South Africa is not regarded as one of the major oil and gas players, we still have quite a competent and strong petrochemicals sector, and also with downstream activities there. Our main trading partners, the majority of our exports goes into 5 countries, largely in SADC, so Botswana, Mozambique, Namibia, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. In West Africa, we're strong with Nigeria, but also particularly because we are importing oil from Nigeria and other few countries in that region. We can move to the next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. I'll jump this slide. I think those matters have been touched adequately. Thank you. Just looking at the effects of the positive impact of the AfCFTA at the macro level, obviously it will help grow African economies, create jobs, and also reduce poverty. I think Fubara spoke about the 30 million people that would be lifted out of poverty, so that's very important. But it also creates an opportunity for African countries to trade more in manufactured and processed goods. Currently, we spend about $500 billion importing goods from the rest of the world, and we can substitute a substantial amount of those goods through the implementation of the FCA with more made in Africa goods. And I think that in itself will then stimulate further industrialization within the continent. It will also allow many countries in the continent, including South Africa, to diversify their export baskets. If we look at what we, particularly South Africa as well, importing from the rest of the continent, largely it's in the area of primary products, raw materials, and so forth. And I believe that with the implementation of the AfCFTA, it creates an opportunities for us to trade in more processed and manufactured goods, and also to engage in knowledge transfer. We are also going to be seeing a shift from overdependence on commodities, which is extremely important. If we look at the oil and gas sector, despite being endowed with significant amounts of oil and gas reserves, most of our countries are still importing refined petroleum products from other parts of the world. We are importing tires from the Middle East and so forth. And I believe that because Africa is so well endowed in natural resources, that the AfCFTA may create opportunities for us to then diversify and add more value to some of our natural resources and begin to see more cables made in Africa from our copper, more tires produced in Africa from our rubber, and so forth, and etc. Next, one other area I think that will benefit Africa significantly is the development of SMMEs, and also increasing the participation of women-owned and youth-owned businesses in intra-Africa trade is also going to be extremely important. If we look at our trade data, particularly the informal sector across our borders, you'll see that the majority of traders are women and in the informal sector. And here is an opportunity I don't like to use the term formalize, but I prefer the term empowering them so that they can become more effective players and included in the mainstream economy. Next slide. Thank you. Just forgive me. I will not touch too much, but I think Fubara touched on this. Africa's income will be growing boosted by about $450 billion. So it simply means that more people, more money, more spending, more demand for certain goods and services. Africa is going to increase its exports by about $560 billion by 2035, mostly in manufacturing. So it augurs well for Africa as well, not just in exporting to the rest of the continent, but also opportunities to export to the rest of the world. And I think one element that we must not exclude is that the AfCFTA is going to add about $76 billion to the income of the rest of the world. So it's not just Africa that stands to benefit, but I think also the rest of the world. In terms of poverty reduction, the major beneficiaries will be West Africa, with about 12 million people sort of benefiting. Central Africa will follow second, with 9.3, Eastern Africa 4.8, and Southern Africa will be the least beneficiary, but still quite significant when we look at that number. What is very interesting is that $292 billion of the income gains that AfTA will generate will be as a result of trade facilitation measure. So what data shows is that the removal of tariff barriers by itself will only contribute about or lead to about 2% decrease in the cost of transactions across the continent. The major area that we still need to work quite a lot on is the removal of non-tariff barriers. And I think that's where we are going to redouble our efforts to work quite hard to ensure that the red tape is reduced, simplify cross-border custom crossing documentation procedures as well. It takes, particularly moving along our roads, takes quite a substantial amount of time to cross borders. In Southern Africa, we are doing assessments when we trade up to East Africa. The cost of delay is estimated at between 350 million rands to 550 million rands per week. That's quite significant, and it makes us very uncompetitive. Next slide, please. Thank you, Crystal. Now, some key areas of intervention that we believe are important for us to consider. One of the things is the agreement is being negotiated, almost completed. And I think countries have submitted their instruments of ratification is extremely important. The next step is really in the domestication of whatever is agreed to at a multilateral level. So here, the need for trade policy alignment and harmonization is key, particularly also in this era of COVID, where moving across border is a challenge. You have countries not recognizing the test results from one country to another. It creates delays. It affects the pricing. So those are some of the key challenges. Custom clearing and also customs documentation procedures, aligning that and harmonizing that becomes extremely important. Fubara touched on the movement of people, how countries will be eager to align that. So that's where I think the hard work will start. Secondly, trade enabling infrastructure. We cannot talk about trade without thinking about the trade enabling infrastructure. Significant investments have to be made in very strategic corridors that interconnect African countries, the production centers to their markets. And I think thus the AfCFTA will give us an opportunity actually to enhance the business case so that we can attract more and more private sector investment into Africa's infrastructure. Because at the moment, private sector investment in infrastructure projects is around 2%. And I think that's wholly inadequate. The promotion of public-private partnership to develop infrastructure, roads, rail, ports, energy, water as well. So there are opportunities there. But I think, fourthly, the other area where a lot of work still needs to do to address the information asymmetry is business and market intelligence. Sometimes it looks like the rest of the world knows more about the continent than we do. It's not easy to come across data. It's not easy to verify facts, but also the fact that in many African countries, our economies are relatively quite informal. So a lot of the data is not easily available and accessible. And I think pulling that together becomes extremely important. Liberalization and removal of non-tariff barriers to trade facilitation, as I said, is extremely important. Countries need to work across borders to ensure that the ease of doing business or the ease of cross-border trade is actually facilitated and enabled, and we come down, improve the index with that regard. Another area that requires cooperation across the continent, boosting productive capacity. As South Africa, oftentimes we are faced with accusations that we just want to export and dump our products in other markets. But the truth is our approach to the rest of the continent is anchored on a development integration approach. We would like to see other countries also industrializing. We would like to see them producing so that we can also buy from one another. And there are many initiatives, particularly in Southern Africa, where we have actually demonstrated that that is our approach, such as, for example, the Maputo Development Corridor that connects us to Mozambique. We have supported a number of regional trade corridors or economic corridor projects across the region that have resulted in many attracting investments there. Lastly, aggregating markets. Our economies, I think many of you touched, are small, and we need to look at how we can aggregate markets, leveraging on the AfCFTA to begin to develop the regional value chains that the continent needs. I think that's all for me now. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. You still had a minute to go. I don't know if you want to quickly mention.
Yes. I'll just touch on that slide of the corridors. If you could just go back before this one, Crystal, if you don't mind. No, the next one, yeah. If the main corridors in Africa have been defined quite a long time ago, and I think for many of you are familiar and have been working in the African economic development space. And what is quite interesting is that a significant portion of these corridors are already almost interconnecting in a very phased manner, even though there is an impression outside that not a lot is being done. So across the continent, we need to work together to see what strategic investments in infrastructure, particularly transport infrastructure, to interconnect and improve the logistics and supply chain efficiencies, because that's going to be critical to make the AfCFTA a success. Next slide. From a South African perspective, we offer our companies a range of incentives to stimulate industrial development within our own economy, but also to support them in doing business, investing and trading across the continent. We have a scheme to promote Black industrialist schemes. As you know, South Africa comes from a background where there was racial discrimination, so there is a government program to empower Black-owned businesses to enter the manufacturing space. We also have incentives to enhance competitiveness of our companies. A number of them, we provide export marketing assistance with research. We've taken companies on trade and investment missions across the continent. We also, where possible, cover costs to bring potential buyers from other African countries to South Africa to meet potential suppliers. We have incentives in infrastructure investment in South Africa to establish special economic zones where we put out as government a range of infrastructure projects. And also quite above all, and I think it's critical to support the AfCFTA, We have funds and facilities to support our companies in undertaking feasibility studies. So if you have a project, you want to do feasibility studies, the condition is obviously that the service providers will have to be South African. At least 50% of the cost of that feasibility study will have to be accrued to a South African company. So it opens up opportunities for partnership with other African countries. And then we have the Export Insurance Credit Corporation, which is under the ban of the DTIC, the department I belong to, which essentially provides a guarantee against political risks, other forms of risk, failure of non-payment or delays, also to protect South African companies there. And then we have a range of DFIs, South Africans, such as the Development Bank of Southern Africa, ECIC, I mentioned, the Industrial Development Corporation, and also the Public Investment Corporation, who work together with us to identify and support both trade and investment related activities across the continent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. We have come to the end of the session. We have 4 minutes left, so it is up to me as the coordinator to firstly thank you as the audience for attending. And I hope that you have taken something valuable from here, if only that there is someone in a country that can help me to help my clients. I would also like to thank Crystal for managing the technology and ensuring a smooth running of the event for us. Vicky Barrington is the African Regional Director for Mauritius. So thank you, Vicky, for arranging the session and for pulling together the speakers and for giving us some useful input about this session. Finally, last and most importantly, to all of our speakers, thank you very much for giving freely of your time and your knowledge to prepare for the session, for showing up. Thank you for tolerating me being rude and interrupting you and telling you that you're running out of time. And I really appreciate that you have helped Mauritius as your organization create value for the other members. If there are any comments or questions about this, please engage with Vicky. You will have her contact details on the invites and the various emails. We will share the presentation as Crystal has said, and I hope that this is the start for all of you as both participants and presenters and as audience members of creating more value for your own companies and for those of the clients that you serve in Africa, given the opportunity that this agreement presents to us. I am going to go on mute and call that the end of the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Crystal. You did a fantastic job helping move things along. And thank you to each of you for joining us today. And a special big thank you to all of our speakers for today. Crystal did a much better job at thanking them, so I'm going to leave the thank you with him. But I did want to say a couple things before we sign off. I wanted to remind you that in the next few days, I will distribute a copy of the presentation, a recording of the webinar, as well as each of the presenters' contact details. I will include Vicky's contact details in that communication as well. Please do not hesitate to reach out to them if you have any further questions. If you did submit a question via the chat feature, I will make sure that we reach out to you directly to answer your question. And with that, thank you again for taking the time to join us today, and I hope everyone has a really great day. Thanks. Bye.